Welcome to The Line. Late last Friday, the federal government shut down for the first time since 2013 after the Senate could not agree on a funding bill. Now, while that shutdown 5 years ago lasted 16 days, the recent one ended on Monday night, as you know, when Congress presented and President Trump signed a short-term spending bill to keep the government open for 3 more weeks. Now, our Line panelists are here to talk about what happened and what might happen when those 3 weeks are up. I'm joined at the table by former State Senator Mark Boitano, Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group PR, attorney Sophie Martin is with us, and Stephanie Maez, Executive Director of Progress Now New Mexico and former state representative. Now, the shutdown may have been short, but New Mexico did feel the impact. Albuquerque Business First reported that while some federal employees were told to report to work on Monday, there were some closures that day and over the weekend. For example, White Sands National Monument and other national parks were closed, and thousands of employees from Kirtland Base reported to work Monday, and this, it just happened. Now, Sophie, let's start with you. While it was back to business as usual on Tuesday, the shutdown was disruptive. We've got some follow-up on this, certainly, that will impact us. But these are scary things when you think about sequestration and stuff like that. We are in a very vulnerable spot, so any given shutdown means something here.
Well, New Mexico is vulnerable because we do have quite a high participation in federal government employment.
That's right.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about this particular shutdown is that there were many places that did remain open.
Right.
So our courts, the federal courts remained open. We saw Sandia and Los Alamos remained open. And the truth is, for New Mexico, while we do get a tremendous amount of employment and funding compared to our overall buckets from the federal government, a lot of what we have is contracting work.
Right.
And so
that's a good point.
What happens with with the management companies of Sandia and Los Alamos and others is that they have a little bit of a cushion built in against furlough. So that doesn't mean that, obviously the person who is furloughed is impacted, our economy is impacted by the loss of those dollars. But a surprisingly large number of people, surprisingly large number of organizations and companies do keep working as long as they can.
Right. Senator, interesting, it's that doubt if you're an employee or an employer or a contractor. I appreciate Sophie's point there. It's that doubt because something gets lost. Things need to keep chugging along, but you're not really working at 100% when you're really not sure what's facing you. So for New Mexico, we've got some decisions to make. We had some of our senators, come down a couple of different ways on this vote. How did you see the politics of this particularly? What was your thought there?
Well, it's interesting. Every time I read about this, I think, why don't we have a balanced budget amendment in Washington? And, if we go back 20 years, remember Senator Paul Simon from Illinois got a balanced budget amendment out of the House, and it missed by 1 vote in the Senate. They need a supermajority. So, 49 states have a balanced budget amendment, including New Mexico, and why can't we do that on a federal level? So,
that's right.
I think we need to think about that. But, honestly, this one, from my viewpoint, was much to do about nothing. So, we look at it from a citizen's viewpoint. Most citizens feel totally detached from Washington. And the interest groups and the candidates love to finger point. They love the drama. They raise money when things like this happen.
That's right.
But it just reinforces a negative idea that most people have about what's happening in Washington and Congress. From the workers' viewpoint, we 2% of our jobs are impacted by this. But you look at Sandia. The reality is, the Sandians work 4-day weeks, a lot of them.
Right.
So I don't know if there was as much of a issue with this. The thing that's really interesting from a political viewpoint is who wins and loses. So, longest shutdown we had was under Clinton, Democrat president, Republican Congress. Republican Congress tried to push conservative initiatives on Clinton. He didn't budge. Clinton was a winner. On this one, I think the Democrats made a huge mistake tying this to DACA. So the issue for most Americans were who's more important, law-abiding Americans or foreign nationals? It was just the wrong issue to really hang their hat on.
That said, I will say this. As we look at it, it sort of seems like it's shifting. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? But what I do think is, from the Democratic perspective, they got that CHIP reauthorization, the 6 years. And I think this is different from the Clinton shutdown in that we have a highly unpopular Congress, we have a highly unpopular president, And this year we have an election. And so I think it remains to be seen whether there's going to be long-term hurt for the Democratic Party, given who they're up against in these midterm elections.
That's a good point. We had, Stephanie, we had the hashtags, the Schumer shutdown, and it was the Trump shutdown. It all added up to a lot of drama, as the senator pointed out. We're all glued to our televisions at midnight, the whole thing.
No, I think
Please.
Sophie points it out very, very well. I think that we have yet to really see who the winners and losers are, and that blame is going to shift back and forth based on what the external environment looks like and how the next few weeks unfold. I do think, though, I would encourage us to move away from this us versus them, winners versus losers frame, and really focus on
Is that possible?
the policy.
Is that really possible, though, in this
Well, I
kind of
mean, I
environment?
think, to a certain degree, I do think it is in our
Okay.
conversations around our kitchen tables and our conversations with our policymakers. Now we have the legislative session, taking place in New Mexico, really thinking through how, from a policy standpoint, we can focus on the actual substance of the policy. So Sophie pointed out CHIP being reauthorized. We were also able to see the prevention of a increase in a tax premium on healthcare. And so there were some real, I think, wins out of the short-term spending bill. But I do also support, what Congresswoman Grisham has said and Lujan, that, we really need to think through what a long-term solution is. We can't keep going from CR to CR. Because the instability that you pointed out, maybe there hasn't been direct impact like this time in particular on the contractors and the federal employees or individual citizens as a whole. But the fact that there's not that stability,
That's right.
I think does impact work product, and it does impact the climate.
Let me ask you a question while you're rolling there. Senators Heinrich and Udall, what was your take on, they voted for the stopgap. And there's been a lot of blowback that Democrats caved, so to speak. Did you see that for our guys?
I think that winners and losers frame is really not one that we should be operating on. And I do see, from the proponents of DACA and who were really excited and really trying to encourage folks to take a position on that now, and really wanted to see our Senate delegation hold the line on that. They were disappointed, and I can understand that. But I also get why Senator Udall and Senator Heinrich did what they did in supporting the short-term spending bill, because I think they feel like they have a solid commitment from McConnell to really truly address both DACA, border security, military spending, and a number of other critical issues.
That's right.
We've seen those promises over and over again, but I think that they have some level of confidence that maybe they haven't had in the past, that this is going to be a serious conversation. The other interesting piece is Senator McConnell was very clear in that he's not going to wait for a green light from the White House, that there's going to be a bipartisan conversation, and hopefully out of that conversation some real policy that could be a compromise.
Well, the president has said that, Tom, I'll cut you off there, that there's a framework possibly. When he gets back from Davos, maybe next week, there's a possibility there. But bringing it back closer to home again, we've got also clouding over this lots of stories on Facebook and in the news of ICE agents going on buses and asking for IDs and families being separated. And we've got that Polish doctor who's been in the United States for 40 years, and people are very upset about that. Meanwhile, all this is going on before we get to what Stephanie's talking about, some kind of resolution on this. It's a difficulty.
Yeah, well, there are multiple narratives taking place. One is there's the narrative in Congress, as far as the horse trading that's taking place, for lack of a better term. Right. There's the backstory as far as the federal agents and really taking a whole different tact altogether as far as a different approach to law enforcement that we've seen from previous presidential administrations. Then the other narrative, which I'm really surprised hasn't really been talked about much in New Mexico, to the question with respect to Senator Heinrich and Senator Udall. They voted for it because they knew how reliant New Mexico is on that federal dollar. And taking that narrative even to the state level with the legislature meeting right now, is there's really, nobody really sees that opportunity to say, we're too reliant upon federal funding.
Yes.
And whenever our state gets to a point of potential paralysis because of what happens in another state, that should send up a lot of flares to saying, guys, we need to readdress this. We need to find ways to get off the federal dole.
That's right.
Or diversify the economy, which are things that have not been successful, not just with the Martinez administration, but the Richardson administration, the Johnson administration. You know, everybody talks about it, nobody's doing anything about it.
Exactly right. So we got about a minute left here. The other issue is the wall, sort of clouding all of this as well. But our angle of attack on this here in New Mexico has been very interesting lately. The governor's come out and said, you know, she's not going to get in the middle of this, but we've got some local legislators saying we want to have, you know, some way to stop this. It's a very interesting thing for us as a border state. It's not just theory for us.
Right. And there are landowners in the southern part of the state who are very concerned that there's going to be an eminent domain action and that they're going to lose part of their properties. So
That's
I think, yes, I mean, the interesting thing I think in Washington, though, is that there is less talk, I think, about a physical wall. Yeah, it comes back around, the president brings back around. But, you know, at least in some of the deals that have been proposed, it's more more staffing, more technology, things like that.
That's right.
That might be, I mean, I've forgotten who it was. There's a congressperson who said, essentially, I think this is a dumb waste of money. But if this is what we do not to have the wall, okay, let's put more money into officers, let's put more money into technology, fine. And, you know, that actually is something that could benefit New Mexico well, that sounds terrible. I know
where you're going.
I don't even want to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, probably some of that money will come to us. But
Sure.
the truth is, so much of our economy is reliant on immigrants that it's really hard to say, like, wall, not
That's right.
wall,
That's right.
you know.
That's right. It's not. It's a little more nuanced than that. Now, when
Our
we come
family
back,
members need there to be
that's
a good
right.
policy.
That's right. When we come back to the line, we'll talk about a call for the head of the Public Education Department to resign.